The very same day Sarah drove to the airport to pick up her first love, I sat at home and signed the divorce papers. She had offered to give me a bit more time to think it over, but I just shook my head and told her there wasn't any need for that. Back in the day, she only married me because Julian had gotten married to someone else, and she felt like she didn't have any other options. I was stable, I had a decent job, and I was respectable enough, so I managed to catch her eye. I've held on to this position as her husband for years, but now that the guy she actually loves is back in the picture, it is definitely time for me to step aside. We ran into each other later at the entrance of the government office, where we finalized things. I was holding the new red certificate that proved I was single again when she actually stepped in front of me to block my path. Her eyes looked all red and puffy, and her voice sounded rough when she asked me what that other woman had that she didn't, and how I could possibly love someone else enough to marry them so quickly. It was a misunderstanding, of course, but I didn't correct her. I had found out Julian was back in kind of a weird way. I was down at the beach a while ago and I literally bumped into my brother-in-law, Toby, who was writing something in the wet sand. He was on a video call on his phone, and he had drawn a huge heart with Sarah's name and his friend's name inside it. He was laughing and tapping the empty space inside the heart with a stick, telling Julian to hurry back because that spot was saved for him. The guy on the other end of the video call laughed back, his voice sounding warm and happy, and said he knew, and that Toby's sister was already there to pick him up. That was the moment I suddenly understood why Sarah had organized her schedule so far in advance and told me she had a specific meeting that morning. Then the man's voice came through again, saying he'd see them tonight. Toby ended the call and turned around, noticing me standing there with a smile on my face. The ocean waves slowly washed up and erased Sarah's name from the sand. I reached out and messed up Toby's hair a bit, just a friendly gesture, and asked him if he was having dinner with Julian that night. He nodded, looking like he wanted to explain or say something more, but he didn't. Tori. We said our goodbyes, and I looked down at the heart where my name was definitely missing. Even before I tried to compare the two of us, I knew I couldn't really match up to Julian. Even though Julian had been married for a while, Sarah's friends always looked at him like he was the real brother-in-law. They would call me Mark, acting as if I was just a business partner or something, polite and respectful, but never anything more than that. It wasn't until I heard how they answered Julian's call that I realized they were actually capable of laughing and joking around with guys too. I started to see the whole picture. They had seen what real love looked like with Sarah and Julian, which made Sarah's choice to settle for me seem pretty clear. In her younger days, Sarah loved with a lot of energy. They used to float over cities in hot air balloons, hug on top of snowy mountains when the sun came up, and kiss at the very top of Ferris wheels. It felt like something that would last forever. But that intense teenage romance ended when Julian went overseas and found someone else. Their spark faded out, leaving me and Sarah to try and make something work. Compared to Julian, I'm not nearly as energetic or interesting. Sarah became a lot more reserved, too. Our daily routine was consistent, but it was also incredibly dull. I would forget where I put things, and she would sit next to me and put labels on them. I can picture the soft dent from the pen as the ink dries on the label. She would tilt her head and smile, telling me that way I wouldn't lose them. In those moments, she really seemed like a normal wife who loved her husband. But when she invited me as her guest to an alumni event, someone asked if we wanted to go see the old campus building where some of Julian's photos were still hanging on the wall. Her grip on my arm got a little tighter. She looked at me and said we shouldn't go or it might bring back memories. It was like she was trying to say she wouldn't think of Julian, because if she did, she would miss him. On my way back home, I decided to call Sarah. My finger hovered over the button for a second before I hit call, but I did it anyway. I felt like she answered slower than she usually did. She asked what was up, and I could hear what sounded like airport noise in the background. I kept my voice steady and asked if she was still in her meeting. Her voice was cool and quiet. And nothing seemed wrong unless you knew she was actually with Julian right then. For a second, I felt lost. Sarah had always been perfect on the surface, but underneath that, there had always been this indifference. She told me she would be home late, which snapped me back to reality. For some reason, I just blurted out and asked if she was going to a get-together. It was her turn to go quiet. I usually never questioned what she was doing. Finally, she said she was with friends. She told me she'd see me later. I was about to hang up when she called my name again and said she would try to come home sooner, and told me not to go to sleep too early. Her words confused me, but I just went along with it. I went to visit a lawyer and got a copy of a standard divorce agreement. I figured whatever Sarah wanted to talk about that night involved us splitting up. Life after divorce could be okay. We had been decent partners through life, so if she wanted out, that was fair. Sitting at home filling out those papers felt a lot like writing a resignation letter for a job. She was a great wife, and I was, at best, just an average husband. When I got to the section about dividing our property, I realized we barely owned anything jointly. The things that were truly mine were minimal, as if I had just been a guest in a stranger's house for 2 years. When I left, I would only be bringing the little bit I had originally arrived with. I didn't stay up waiting for Sarah that night. By midnight, I put the papers on the table and packed up my stuff. While I was cleaning up, I found an unsent wedding invitation. I remembered Sarah meticulously writing a bunch of them and insisting none were missing, even when I thought there were. This one was addressed to Julian. It had a bent corner and a small water stain, maybe from a single tear, which wasn't exactly shocking to find. After I finished packing, I turned out the lights and went to sleep. The next morning, I woke up with Sarah lying next to me. She was already awake. She playfully tugged at my hair, which was something she usually did. The faint smell of alcohol let me know she was hungover from the night before. I apologized for sleeping in. I shook my head and said it was no big deal, then got up to go make her some porridge. When I came out of the kitchen, Sarah had already left. The divorce papers on the coffee table were gone too. My luggage was piled up in the corner, making me look like a kid trying to run away from home. I couldn't be bothered to guess what Sarah wanted to say the night before. I didn't want to figure out why she was delaying the divorce. I preferred to just believe I was being understanding again. My phone buzzed with a message from Julian. It was a picture of Sarah making him some hangover soup. The text said she forgot to tell me she left, so she asked him to let me know she was with him. I typed back a simple "Okay," feeling totally indifferent. I doubted that is exactly what Sarah said. She is the type to play her role as a wife completely. I got Julian's contact info back during a college club recruitment event. He and Sarah were 2 years ahead of me in school. I added his number when I signed up for hiking. Her friends always found me boring compared to Julian. He was more daring and adventurous. I used to be like that too, until my family went through some tough times. Losing my dad made me grow up really fast. Back in school, I was an outsider watching their love story happen. I saw her set off fireworks with his name on them for her birthday. When I heard about Julian's wedding abroad, it was during a hiking event. Sarah collapsed from exhaustion, and I thought she was just out of breath. I quickly handed her an oxygen bottle. She thanked me and asked for my name. She repeated Mark slowly. Later, when her friends asked why she suddenly decided to pursue me, she just smiled softly, as if it was just a random whim. For years, they all saw me as someone she used to pass the time, never taking me seriously. They would shamelessly bring up Julian whenever Sarah was around. I called my best friend Dave and asked if I could crash at his place for a few days. On the other end, he sounded surprised and asked if she finally picked a fight with me. I said no while dragging my suitcase toward the door and told him we were getting divorced. I heard the door close and looked up, surprised. Sarah raised an eyebrow and sat on the couch, pulling yesterday's divorce papers out of her pocket. She asked if I had thought it through. Her tone was calm, but her eyes were staring right into mine. She apologized, saying she drank too much the night before. She said if this was about that, she promised it wouldn't happen again, and we could think about it some more. But I could smell a different perfume on her, one she hadn't worn since she broke up with Julian. Did she really only go drinking? Why couldn't she just tell me who she was with? I shook my head and told her there was no need, then handed her the pen and told her to sign it. She frowned and flipped through the papers, pointing at the property division section. She asked if that was it, mentioning she had a lot of assets, and in court I would be awarded some. I hadn't seen her take this long to read a document in a while, checking every detail. I told her no, that money was all hers, and I didn't want it. She chuckled, her emotions hard to read, and said all right. She signed her name quickly, but hesitated over the signature line, making me wonder if she was going to change her mind. I picked up my suitcase and left. Later that night, she texted me asking if she should mail the divorce certificate, or if I would pick it up. I thought for a moment and told her to give me an address and I would come get it. She said to meet at the courthouse entrance. I exited the chat and signed up for a hiking trip with Dave and his girlfriend. The departure was set for the same day I would pick up the divorce papers. Boys stay boys, right? I'm not young anymore, but finding a bit of that youthful feeling isn't a bad thing. I'm not that old anyway. When I went to see Sarah, she was in her car looking at her phone. I tapped on her window. She rolled it down and I saw she was canceling a flight. She asked if I booked the wrong ticket. She said that they were anniversary trip tickets from before, and she didn't get a chance to tell me. I realized what she had wanted to talk about that night. It was our anniversary, too. I didn't know what to say, so I awkwardly asked for the papers. No. She handed them to me. That's when I noticed Julian sitting in the car. He smiled and offered his hand. Sarah looked away and didn't say anything. I took the red booklet and thanked her calmly. My phone rang. It was Dave telling me they were boarding soon and to get there fast. After hanging up, their car was already gone. I couldn't figure her out. She wanted me to know the divorce wasn't her idea, yet she let Julian show off right in front of me. I rushed to the airport, deleting her and her friend's contacts along the way. Guessing her thoughts was exhausting. At the airport, meeting up with the group, Dave pulled me aside excitedly and pointed through the crowd. I spotted Julian and Sarah. Julian was holding Sarah's arm and saying goodbye. Sarah seemed to enjoy it, hugging his shoulder. The world is too small when you bump into them even on a hiking trip. I tried to hide in the crowd and met Sarah's gaze. She started making her way towards me, but couldn't get through the dense crowd. She pulled out her phone and typed into the chat, asking what was up with the sudden interest in hiking again. She sent it, but it only got a cold red exclamation mark because I had deleted her. Her usually cool smile, which had been like a mask for so many years, suddenly looked incredibly stiff. Julian didn't make it to the top of the mountain, maybe because he hadn't trained much while he was abroad. By halfway up, he was exhausted. He wasn't far from me, so I brought him back to camp, gave him oxygen, and fed him some glucose. Julian was surprised to see me when he opened his eyes. After the shock wore off, he grabbed my arm and thanked me. Sarah probably heard about it because she rushed over in the middle of the night to take him away. Seeing me there, she looked a bit dazed. She cleared her throat and thanked me. I couldn't help but laugh. These two were quite a match. Even their reactions were the same. After helping Julian out of the camp, she somehow returned and asked if I had anyone coming to pick me up. That sounded awkward. She assumed I couldn't make it to the top either, like Julian, and stayed behind to take care of him. I paused from putting on my gear and laughed, asking why I would be gearing up for another climb if I needed someone to pick me up. During those years of marriage with her, I never stopped working out 3 times a week, rain or shine. She just never cared about those aspects of my life. I caught a glimpse of Julian in the passenger seat, staring dazedly at Sarah. I told her she better get going and not keep him waiting too long. After I got back, Dave mentioned celebrating my freedom. He joked that a man is either promoted or divorced when he's doing well, and dragged me to the local amusement park. At the park entrance, I spotted 2 familiar faces. Julian looked excited. It fit. This place had thrilling roller coasters he would love. I tugged on Dave's sleeve, awkwardly looking away. The next moment, my path was blocked. Julian said he just happened to be here too, and asked if we wanted to join them. He stood silently looking at his empty hand. I glanced at Dave with a slight smile and said no thanks, explaining to Sarah that I had a friend with me. She sighed, almost inaudibly, her eyes fixed on me, and told me that if my bag got too heavy to let her know and she would have her assistant help. Then she remembered I'd deleted her contact and added that her number hadn't changed. I noticed the bag on her shoulder was clearly Julian's. Dave teased that she was quite nice and polite, just like when we were together. Our day at the park was oddly shadowed by Sarah and Julian trailing us. When night fell, Dave wanted to ride the Ferris wheel because his heart couldn't handle the high thrill rides. I nodded and joined the line. Once again, Sarah and Julian queued up right behind us. I felt awkward, filling the silence with idle chatter with Dave. As we boarded, a staff member stopped Sarah and said they were full this time. Through the glass, I saw something fade in her eyes. She walked out of line, and Julian clutched her sleeve. Tunpoi koe, wanting to ride. She sat on a nearby bench and said no, claiming she was afraid of heights. In truth, she braved it back then because of Julian's love for extreme sports. She took him on hot air balloons and mountain climbs. She watched the Ferris wheel's reflection on the river, lost in thought. She wasn't young anymore, realizing she had lost that old courage. Julian noticed Sarah's downcast demeanor and gently patted her shoulder. He had never seen her look so fragile, like someone completely giving in to fate. When I got off the Ferris wheel, she got up and reached for Julian's hand, suggesting they watch the fireworks. But looking back, the person she wanted beside her had already disappeared into the crowd. She couldn't catch up. Later, Dave and I moved to another city for work. I became a professional photographer. Most of the updates about Sarah and Julian came from the news since Dave was a reporter. One day he showed me a broadcast of a press conference. It was a shareholder unveiling for a major company. Under the spotlight, Julian, in a designer suit, stepped up to speak. He had joined the board. Sarah had given him half of her shares. Grabbing the mic, he smiled and said he wanted to especially thank someone. His eyes shifted to the audience. The reporters buzzed, capturing the moment. I knew he meant Sarah. The camera panned to her, looking at the sparkling Julian on stage as if reliving her vibrant youth. Someone asked if the rumors were true that he was getting engaged soon. A bit shy, he lowered his head, showing off a ring, and said yes, inviting everyone to come. The video cut off there. Dave patted my shoulder and asked what I thought. I silently turned off the screen and said they were a good match. Dave asked if that was it. I nodded and said, yeah, that's it. We weren't compatible. Staying together just drained us both. Holding on to something not mine, no matter how tightly, was like grasping water flowing past my fingers. So, in the end, it's better to never cross that river. Just skim across the shore like a breeze. That's enough. But then Dave told me that Julian's engagement party was today, and his fiancée wasn't Sarah. She didn't even attend. Julian said she had to leave for a business trip and couldn't make it back. I was leaning back on the sofa, staring at the ceiling. For some reason, my mind felt a bit chaotic. I told Dave, let's go hiking. At the airport, I spotted a figure surrounded by bodyguards from afar. She was hurrying towards the exit. What could be happening in this small city that would make the CEO skip her first love's engagement party? Dave tugged on my sleeve, bringing me back to reality, and we headed towards the boarding gate. The plane took off with some turbulence. We left Sarah and that small town behind. During that hike, I captured an incredible sea of clouds at sunrise. I also took wedding photos for Dave and his girlfriend. We had a guide named Maya. That photo set unexpectedly won an award, and I especially thanked her on stage. On the climb, I almost fell into a crevasse, and she held on to me tightly, pulling me out. Some nosy reporters dug into my past with Sarah. They asked if I had anything to say to her. I held the mic, smiled, and shook my head gently, saying we were no longer involved, and I hoped everyone focused on my present. I invited Maya, Dave, Bonkorn, and the others to the award ceremony. After coming off stage, I sat down with them to chat. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a figure standing in the back row. It was Sarah, wearing a royal blue scarf I had given her as an anniversary gift. She looked at me for a long moment, and then smiled tenderly, though it seemed self-deprecating. Dave suddenly shifted the conversation, mentioning that they were planning to get married, and asked if I had any plans to marry. Sarah, who was walking toward us, froze in place as soon as he finished speaking. I signaled them to keep quiet and quickly led them out of the banquet hall. Just as we left, We bumped into Toby. He was another award recipient that night. Sarah probably came to support her brother. It was awkward making eye contact, so I gave him a friendly nod. He seemed unsure of how to react, and stood in silence for a while. Then he found an awkward topic, asking if that was the girlfriend I thanked on stage. He blinked and said he thought he heard me talking about marriage. I shook my head, about to explain she wasn't my girlfriend, but then his name was called from backstage. He gave me a knowing look, straightened his suit, and left, leaving Sarah and me awkwardly facing each other in the hallway. Trying to be polite, I greeted her. She leaned against the wall, eyes downcast, looking somewhat pitiful. She turned her head and asked if Maya was good to me. I was taken aback, realizing she had misunderstood. Feeling a tightness in my chest, I inexplicably answered that she was all right. Sarah stubbed out her cigarette and asked if I was getting married. I shook my head and told her no. She's not my girlfriend, Sarah. She seemed to think I was lying, giving a bitter smile and nodding lightly, saying all right. I knew she didn't want to hear any more explanations. We parted ways after a simple farewell. I had to prepare for my next climb while she joined her brother's award presentation on stage. Afterward, with the prize money, I started a mountaineering club. Somehow Sarah heard about this and signed up. Since then, whenever I went hiking, if she found out, she'd join. Each time Maya let us up first, and when I looked back down, I'd always see her at mid-mountain gazing up at me. Everyone, including her, didn't say much. Our interactions were mostly non-verbal. Now she seemed out of place in my circle. Many noticed her being different and subtly asked me about us. I gathered them and explained everything. Leaving out the conversation in the hallway outside the banquet hall. I was baffled why I hadn't asked that day why she didn't marry Julian. I seemed to know the answer. But like when others asked if she'd visit the old school building, I feared I'd dwell on it if I pondered. I was afraid that forever in a wavering stance, I'd start reminiscing. Dave and his girlfriend were getting married. Getting this news, I grabbed my camera along with some props and accompanied them to the registrar's office. With the embossed marriage certificate, I wished them a happy ever after. Dave went to change, and I held the red certificate outside. The path was suddenly blocked. It was snowing and some had settled on her shoulders. How long had she been waiting outside? And how did she know I was here? Was Sarah at the registrar to get married too? Without allowing any refusal, she took the marriage certificates from me, touched their covers, and handed them back. Her voice was hoarse when she asked me, "Didn't I say she wasn't my girlfriend?" She chuckled softly and asked why I lied to her. Bowing her head, I watched her eyes go from dry to red. She reached out as if to hug me. I stood stiffly. She quickly regained her composure and slipped her hands into her pockets. She asked what makes her better than Sarah that I'd want to marry her. For the first time since I've known Sarah, she seemed undone before me. Her earlier fierceness wilted. Taking a deep breath to steady a trembling voice, she asked where she was. Seeing my silence, she laughed sardonically and asked why she wasn't with me, and if we didn't really love each other. She asked if her family pressured me. And her barrage of questions left me stunned. I only noticed her face growing more distressed, seeming both expectant of an explanation and desperate for a reason to let go. Too tired to speak, I only shook my head. Turning to head back to the hall, I heard her voice from behind congratulating me on my wedding. That night I got a call from an unknown number. Through the line I could hear a noisy background. I struggled to recognize the voice on the other side, but I just couldn't figure it out. So awkwardly I asked who it was. Suddenly it got quiet. The reply came that it was the bartender. He said there was a woman there who came alone to drink, and now she was drunk and wouldn't wake up. He said I was her emergency contact, so he was calling to ask if I could pick her up. I immediately guessed it was Sarah. Just as I was about to refuse, there was some static, and Sarah took the phone. She asked if I really loved that person. She sounded like she'd smoked a lot and was pretty drunk because her words were all slurred. She told me she missed me so much. I almost laughed out loud. I never imagined cheesy lines like that coming from Sarah. I couldn't have ever pictured it before. She asked why I divorced her back then, I found it funny all of a sudden. It was her who secretly couldn't get over Julian when we were married, and now she was asking me why we divorced. It really makes you wonder if she's losing it because Julian didn't marry her. I told Sarah if she was upset to go see a counselor because I couldn't help her with that. And by the way, I told her she should change her emergency contact because we were divorced. She asked if we divorced because of Julian. Ooh, that was her only question. An awkward pause followed. She said she had moved on from him. Her voice wavered and I couldn't help but question her. I asked if that was why she ditched our trip plans to pick him up at the airport, or how she ignored the porridge I made but went out of her way to make him hangover soup. I asked if that is what she calls moving on. I gripped my phone tighter, never feeling so assertive before. I told her let's end things peacefully. It was like I'd yelled some sense into her, and her voice calmed down. She apologized, which I never imagined I'd ever hear from her. She said she shouldn't have kept it from me, that she went with friends to pick up Julian so I wouldn't overthink. She said she knew I wouldn't forgive her, and she truly messed up, but she claimed that day she didn't go to see Julian. She said Julian was joining the company board, and a meeting came up last minute, which is why she asked him to tell me. She said the hangover soup was for herself because he had already had his. If all that was true, she asked if I would give her another shot, leaving those words hanging in the air. The next morning as I headed out, I saw a familiar figure at the end of the hallway. I wasn't surprised someone would come find me, but I didn't expect it to be Toby. I stood still watching him walk over. He asked if I wasn't married. It didn't shock me that Sarah looked into it, so I nodded honestly. I told him she isn't someone with a double heart, and she explained things last night too. He said these days she's been asking folks to find me without bothering me by getting too close. He told me the day I went to the civil office she stood in the snow all morning by herself. She wanted him to ask if I'd be willing to start over. I reached out, tousling his hair like I did by the beach. I smiled, feeling at ease, and told Toby no. Actually, I told him there's another reason for our divorce. We're just not right for each other. We can't drop our guard and be our true selves. We're like two air currents crashing and grinding against each other until we're entirely worn out. If it's true she's over Julian, going back to her would just mean getting the same old Sarah. And that's the most pointless thing. He stubbornly met my gaze, his eyes so much like his sister's. Eventually, his shoulders slumped. He pulled out his phone, showing a voice call on the screen. Sarah's voice was especially gravelly from the hangover when she said she wished me happiness. Sarah had many friends from different walks of life, so it's inevitable to bump into them now and again. After clearly turning Sarah down, whenever asked about her, I'd just shake my head and say I didn't know. Busy preparing for one mountain climbing trip after another, standing on cliffs trying to capture the perfect light and shadow, I began to gain some recognition. When I met those acquaintances again, now they respected me more than before the divorce. Sarah eventually faded out of my life. I thought we'd never cross paths again. I didn't expect we'd meet once more. I hate attending business events, but the sponsor's party was non-negotiable. Among the guests were Sarah's old friends and Julian. Maybe they ran out of things to talk about and turned the topic to me. Someone joked that before Mark and Sarah got divorced, they always thought he wasn't as adventurous as Julian. But who knew Julian wouldn't be the party animal he used to be, yet Mark changed. They asked if Sarah was still hung up on him. Someone else at the table said she just hasn't met the right guy, still pulling young adults' moves at her age and doesn't care about family at all. I let go of the door handle. Even many years later, when they no longer saw me as boring or difficult, they'd still find reasons to pick on me. In their eyes, neither my past self nor my present self could ever compare to Julian. I was never truly one of them, but I don't need to be anymore. Just as I was about to push the door, a hand grabbed my wrist. I looked up to see Sarah, Tina, shadows in her eyes. She looked ready to speak in my defense. I yanked my hand away and swung the door open. I told them they were quite right, but wanted to correct something. I said it's not that I've changed. I've always been this way. I just never had the interest or obligation to amuse them. The laughter on their faces froze. I told them since they all had opinions on my personal conduct, I was sure they also disapproved of my club management and promotional style. I picked up a glass from the table and downed it in one go. I said, let's call this a farewell dinner then, and that we would end our partnership when we got back. Someone tried to smooth things over, saying partnerships are about mutual benefit, and not to take it so seriously. I ignored them and turned to Sarah. I told her, by the way, I hoped she finds someone better soon. I walked out of the room with long strides. All that was left was the stunned silence and the sound of Sarah slamming her hand on the table. After returning, I planned the next hike. Unexpectedly, Julian signed up. This time the destination was the very mountain where Julian had collapsed halfway before. I knew he had something to say, so I put him in my group. At the spot where he had given up last time, he stopped me. He sat on the ground looking up, his eyes sparkling just like in college. He said he thought he owed me an apology too. I signaled the rest of the team to move ahead. He admitted when he first came back he hadn't let go of Sarah. He said he deliberately sent misleading messages and deliberately had Sarah pick him up the day I came for the divorce papers. He said he knew it was gross. From the moment he saw her again, he knew she didn't love him anymore. He said we aren't young anymore. She won't love him like back then, even if he tried to recreate the past. He realized it was pointless. He suddenly looked up with an awkward smile. He said he nearly lost his life trying right here, actually, and he had to thank me. He said he knows Sarah loves me not just for my stability when I was her husband, but also for my bravery now. But he said I shattered her and her friends' illusions about me. He noted I said I didn't fit. Because of me, he realized it doesn't matter how others see you or whether they love you. He thanked me and gripped my hand tightly. He said we have both let go. He gazed into the distance, watching the sea of clouds. Putting aside the bet with his younger self, he said this is the real allure of climbing. After the hike, Chitot, Maya invited me to dinner. We'd worked together many times already and understood each other well. Seeing her hesitant at the dinner table, I prompted her to speak her mind. She twisted her fingers nervously, avoiding my gaze. Her face flushed red. After a long pause, she just asked if I liked anyone. I shook my head. She asked if there was none at all. I knew what she wanted to say. I asked if she was trying to confess. Her face turned even redder. Biting her lip, she said she wanted to say it on the mountaintop, but me and Julian were talking and she got too shy to speak. Before I could respond, she hurriedly stopped me. Suddenly, someone tapped my shoulder. I looked up to see Julian along with Sarah and Dave. Dave asked with a raised eyebrow, and looking amused, if I would consider Maya. Julian waved a hand, saying he wasn't there to interrupt. He said Maya told him she was scared, and asked him to back her up when we were talking. He glanced at Sarah. She wanted to come, her hands casually shoved in her pockets. After I stared for a moment, she squeezed out that she said she'd wish me happiness. I glanced at the 4 awkward faces around me, finally resting my gaze on Maya. I apologized and said I have no plans for another relationship. Feeling that was too absolute, I cleared my throat and added at least not right now. There are still so many things I want to explore. No time to divide my attention to another person. When I was young, I thought I'd never want to marry. Like the wind, I want to move through mountains and rivers, always reaching for the horizon. Seeing her disappointed expression, I patted her shoulder and told her we can still be teammates even if it's not about love. I told her she is the best climbing guide I've ever known. She stood, her eyes now shining, and asked which mountain is next. The wind slipped in through the open window, caressing each of our faces. Just like how it gently sweeps over the landscape, lifting the birds, the wind doesn't linger.